We're all so glad to have all of you here so we can be a Sangha together and share and practice. So, to start, we'll do a grounding meditation. I like to have my feet on the ground. So, sitting any way that helps you feel alert, grounded. With the spine expansive and sweeping up toward the sky. Taking some long and slow, deep breaths all the way in, all the way out. Just noticing what the body feels like today. Feeling your mood, noticing how the heart feels, the belly, and touching into the energy in your being. Feeling connected to the earth that holds us. And allowing whatever energy or mood whatever sense of openness or resistance, just whatever you find, welcoming it. As a part of this moment. That belongs just as much as the air that you're breathing. And welcoming this sense of togetherness. All of us here practicing, awakening, opening our hearts and minds, supporting each other. So, returning in your own time, to the circle. Welcome again to everyone. It's wonderful to be together this morning, sharing, being a Sangha. So, what we're going to do today is that I will share initially about the possibility of opening in a generous way to our suffering and to the suffering of others. Then we'll have some mindful movement, maybe a short break, and we'll explore in a meditation how we can be with ourselves and our dukkha. So today is more on suffering or dukkha. It's central, of course, to Buddhism because the Buddha offers us a way to end suffering. He taught that dukkha is caused by clinging to what's pleasant and pushing away what's unpleasant. So if we can let go of clinging, which isn't easy to do, we won't suffer anymore. And it might seem impossible that suffering can ever end for humans, but that depends on how we define suffering. There is inevitable difficulty in life, of course. As humans, we lose people we love because they die or we die first. We and our loved ones get ill, have physical pain, terrible emotional pain sometimes. And so human life presents a lot of opportunities for suffering. From the searing pain of a death to the everyday frustration of driving around in DC traffic or other traffic. But the kind of suffering that the Buddha taught is unnecessary. It's caused by clinging. And essentially, we cling to the way we want the world to be. And there's an awful lot about life that isn't the way we want it to be. We'd all like everything to be pleasant. And when it is, we want it to stay that way. And it never does. We'd like to control the present and the future, including other people. And that's just human. But of course, life is forever changing, it's unpredictable, and we can never find a safe place for once and for all. So every day we're faced with what the Theravadan scholar Bhikkhu Bodhi calls the unsatisfactoriness and radical inadequacy of everything. Because everything is impermanent and ultimately bound to perish. So we cling and we fight against the way our existence is, and we suffer. And I'm just going over this. I know you know it, but we really can't be reminded enough about how we create dukkha by clinging, and then how we add to it every day by refusing to face it and feel it. We deny and distract and deflect, and our culture is complicit. The Buddha said it's crucial that we feel and ultimately comprehend our suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh says, you cannot know happiness without knowing suffering. They exist in each other. So, what I am going to talk about is our almost superstitious fear of suffering. Look around at the enormous investment of emotional and economic resources that help us avoid suffering. There's Netflix, streaming, there's social media, the snack industry, shopping, drugs, alcohol. Our culture has an infrastructure of avoidance. And our fear of suffering is clearest when a friend is in pain. When a friend suffers a terrible loss, loses a dear one, or is diagnosed with a terrible or fatal disease, a part of us is afraid to be with them. What should I say? What can I say that would help? And we know intellectually as adults that we don't really have to say anything other than, I love you. And that our presence can give support, just being there. But it's scary to be in the presence of severe emotional or physical pain. You might have noticed in yourself in that situation your impulse to somehow fix it, though that's impossible. And it's really simply a desire to alleviate your own discomfort. It's human. Norman Fisher, a Zen priest and teacher, says that when you're suffering from a real hardship, people come and offer kind words, distracting gifts, but it all really misses the mark because they aren't capable of receiving your pain. They simply can't acknowledge and feel the pain. And their presence ends up making you feel alienated and isolated. And that's because they're terrified of their pain, and therefore they're terrified of your pain. So we can't be with the suffering of others in an open way until we can be with our own suffering. To receive another person's pain, we must deeply know our own. We must experience it 1,000 times, or we'll stay afraid of other people's pain and our own. Matthew Brensilver, a teacher at Spirit Rock, observes that shame is often woven through our suffering. Pain brings an inevitable feeling of need. And the need of the pain makes us want to hide it. So our wound and our shame sort of become one. It's really vulnerable to be seen in pain. And think about it. Have there been times when you've suffered severely and just not wanted to share. And even when we're alone with pain, there can be an element of shame. Even though we're alone and the viewer that we're embarrassed in front of is ourselves. Shame always imagines an audience. And that's partly why it's painful. So, our social conditioning is probably a factor in why we're ashamed and uncomfortable about our suffering. In the West, we have an individualistic culture, and we're taught to be brave and stoic and self sufficient and not to whine or complain. And so, all of that increases our sense of isolation and that of others when we suffer. Thich Nhat Hanh said that understanding someone is the greatest gift you can give. Understanding is love's other name. And you can't understand someone unless you understand their pain. So you can't love them unless you understand their pain. And that makes sense if you've ever been in pain and had a friend or loved one who was able to be with that. It's very supportive to have someone witness our pain tenderly as if they are familiar with it. So we need that from a friend. And really, most importantly, we need it from ourselves. So, how can we be with ourselves and our pain, our dukkha, with generosity? First, we have to recognize it. And our habit from years of conditioning is to overlook our pain, to soldier on, ignore, distract, proceed with our to-do list, and get on with life. And meditators like ourselves might not fully recognize it because we look for spiritual pleasure. With meditation, we find comfort and calm. And there's a term for that. It's called spiritual bypass. And it's when we use spiritual practice to deny our emotional wounds that really need our attention. So we all distract, we all avoid. And the way we heal and grow is to comprehend our suffering and be with it in an undefended way. And to be with it doesn't mean, to know it doesn't mean that we dissolve into it or become overwhelmed by it. In fact, we can't comprehend dukkha if we're identified with it. If we think of it as something we own, it is us. And so in meditation, we can make space for it by awareness. That awareness, that witnessing gives it space. And it helps us be less identified with it. it's a practice. And there's a lot of resistance that we feel very naturally. And so we need to sit over and over with our dukkha so that awareness and kindness can erode our defenses. And it's not an analytical or intellectual exercise. We need to feel our dukkha in a visceral way. The mind wants to stay in control and to analyze and think about it. But dukkha can't be controlled. It can be repressed temporarily, but it festers in the dark like a wound. So, to truly comprehend suffering, as the Buddha taught, we open to the physical sensations in the body, because we are a body and our pain resides there. So, when we give free rein to feel the dukkha in the heart or chest or belly or wherever, we're really allowing our heart mind to do its mysterious healing process. Gail Fronsdale likens this to the way that your finger, after you cut it, will overnight mysteriously start growing new skin and protecting the cut, filling in the cut. And that is essentially a mysterious life force, even though scientists can put a name to the process. It's just a miracle, really. And that's what the body and heart can do to heal our dukkha, if we can let it in and be with it. And resistance will rise again and again. We'll pull back from the pain. And we must be gentle and patient and allow it to be without judgment. Our dukkha needs our love. So even if you don't feel kind, if you feel aversive to the suffering or to yourself, that's okay. We can have the intention, the wise intention, to be with our suffering with kindness. And the Buddha taught that wise intention is enduring. It outlasts moods and emotions that fluctuate, come and go. So we want to give credence and authority to our wise intention to heal. Personally, when I sit with dukkha, I find that my egoic mind goes to arguing with it, with either myself or the other person involved, about why this situation is wrong. The suffering is wrong. And noticing what the mind is doing, I become aware that the pain goes to a higher warp. Wrestling with the pain, when my mind wrestles with the pain, it's not helpful. So I witness that. And It's essentially the egoic self's way of defending itself. The self is identifying with the suffering and trying to defend it. And sometimes I notice my egoic self makes itself a victim. And that's a way of clinging to the way that it wants things to be, which is how the pain got started in the first place. So, kind awareness and the intention of returning and facing and feeling suffering helps. Gil Fronsdale teaches that the heaviest suffering comes from the self being in charge, making up predictions and stories about the pain. The lightest suffering is when the dukkha is in the body and heart. And then it becomes not even your suffering. There is suffering, but not really a self who suffers. And so, just as when we meditate on the breath, the mind gets distracted over and over into thinking, and then we return to the breath. When we meditate on suffering, we resist feeling it over and over. And we keep returning to it, to the sensations, with the intention of honesty and generosity. Remembering that it's okay, that resisting is human. And it takes time and practice because the impulse to avoid suffering is so innate. Jonathan Faust talks about when he was 10 years old and he realized that the rule of life everyone seems to follow is that we all get old, or we all rather not get old, we all die at some point. And he remembers being pretty sure that he'd find a way to get out of it. So when we try to comprehend our suffering, we're going against years and decades of conditioning that tell us to find a way out of it. If we can comprehend that our suffering isn't a threat to our worth or our goodness, that it's noble because we're being with what is, we're better able to accept pain without defending ourselves and making ourselves into the victim. When we touch into our suffering, it touches us to the quick. We can connect to something deeper and more important than our suffering. Something that's as tender as the quick underneath the fingernails, an alive and pure place. Feeling our suffering awakens our deepest care. It awakens compassion for ourselves and for the world's suffering. So, thank you for your kind attention. And now we'll do some mindful movement. Now we will have a guided meditation, remembering that it is a practice. Just like all meditation is, we're learning to be with what is. So, this meditation is partly based on one offered by Gil Fronsdale. So, I invite you to sit upright, allowing the spine and the internal organs to aerate. Feeling the feet on the floor, the backside on the chair or cushion. And really allowing all of the muscles except those holding the spine to release downward into the embrace of gravity. The earth's gravity. Feeling the muscles in the face and releasing. The tension around the eyes, the small muscles under the eyes, the eyeballs themselves, letting go, letting go. The skin and muscles around the cheeks and chin. They don't need to be constricted or making any expression. Just releasing. Releasing. Feeling into the tongue and the lips and the jaw. Breathing into any tension that you find. The shoulders, the inside of the shoulders. Just inviting them to give way to gravity. There's nothing to hold up. allowing the heart to open, the chest to widen. And let go. Allowing the breath to comfort all the tight places in the head and chest and belly. Softening the belly and the back body. As the breath moves gently against, like the waves of the ocean against the shore. And now unfolding within yourself some pain that you've been avoiding, some dukkha, not something traumatic, because this is a practice, a difficulty that you've been denying or avoiding in some way. Allowing in the sensations of this into the body. Locating this discomfort and opening to it. Maybe it's in the chest, the belly, the throat, or anywhere else. Opening to what you feel. Allowing it. Like the tall grass that allows itself to be moved by a breeze. Just letting it be. And if it feels too difficult, you might put your attention to a part of the body that does not feel discomfort. Say the lips, the toes, and titrate back and forth. There may be constriction or tightening or aching. It might help to label these sensations. In the chest or belly or back. Breathing into these places of discomfort. If you notice resisting, a sense of pulling back, just allowing that without resisting the resistance. Breathing into the resistance. Allowing it to be. Feeling into the soft, vulnerable animal within your skin. Being with that tenderly. Nothing you feel is wrong here. returning again and again to the felt sense. Patiently. Putting a hand on your chest or somewhere else if that feels right. If you're aware of the mind resisting, arguing, just patiently returning, allowing the heart to open to the suffering. Being generous toward the painful sensations and to the effort to dodge them, allowing it all. Feeling the space around this pain, breathing into it. And asking what other deeper qualities, such as compassion, might emerge. Opening the heart to the suffering of others, allowing that in. The suffering of the world, the violence, oppression, natural disaster, and human loss. Allowing it into your heart. Holding it in a space of tender awareness. That's big enough for it and for the force of love and compassion and equanimity. Vast space of awareness. There's a poem by Rick Fields. Behind the hardness there is fear. And if you touch the heart of the fear, you find sadness. It sort of gets more and more tender. And if you touch the sadness, you find the vast blue sky. So now we have time for questions and sharing.